Well, that hasn't been my particular pathway. Generally speaking, I believe Costco does more for civilization than the Rockefeller Foundation. I think it's a better place. So you get a bunch of very intelligent people sitting around trying to do good. I immediately get kind of suspicious and squirm in my seat. So that may be a prejudice of mine, which isn't quite fair, but I've seen so much good in the world by people who really created better systems. And I've seen so much folly and stupidity on the part of our major philanthropic groups, including the World Bank, that I really have more confidence in building up the more capitalistic ventures like Costco. That may be just a crotchet of mine, and you may be right that your way is better. On the other hand, if I'm right and you're as promising as I think you are, I think you'll end up like me.
Other questions? I see in the very back of the room right here. Sorry, I'm keeping the microphone people running.
I think I can be louder now.
Okay, that's fair enough.
I'm Matt. I'm a BBA sophomore, and I'm also a Berkshire shareholder, so you couldn't get rid of our argument. My question relates to the series of booms and busts we've had. Do you think we've entered just a series now because of technology that all we're going to have are big bubbles and big busts? We've seen the tech bubble, and now we're the housing bubble.
I think you can count on more booms and busts over your remaining lifetime. How big and with what cyclicality, I can't tell you. I can tell you the best way of coping, which is just to put your head down and behave creditably every day. And I will say something about life generally. I was very lucky in that I had an ancestor that I never met. My mother's grandfather was a pioneer. He came out to Iowa and he lived in a sod house with his young wife. That's a cave through 2 winters. And he literally was a pioneer from nothing. And he rose finally to where he controlled the leading bank in the town and was a very reputable citizen and a very charitable man. He joined Andrew Carnegie and gave the town library to Algona. My grandfather made him do it, my great-grandmother. He never would have done it by himself. And he made him put his giant tarpon in the library as part of the gift. So always amused me to go by that library and see this giant tarpon. So eccentrics come naturally in my family. But at any rate, having wrested this success from hardship and danger and trouble, and he was a captain in the Black Hawk Wars. I mean, he was literally a soldier and part of this. He had this theory, looking back at his long life, with this unusual success. And he owned a bunch of farms at the end that he leased to Germans. But you couldn't lose money leasing a farm to a German in Iowa. Naturally, he was successful. But what he said over and over again to his grandchildren, including my mother, was that real opportunities that come to you are few. It's a very fortunate life that is just bathed in opportunity all the way. Most people just get a few times when they can make a huge difference by seizing a huge activity. And he said, when you find one, my dear grandchildren, and you can clearly recognize it, he says, seize it boldly and don't do it small. And my mother, who wasn't interested in finance, but liked to talk the family, she liked to transmit the family quirks. But of course, this guy was my soulmate. The great-grandfather I never knew. And of course, I totally adopted his point of view. And I must say it has worked wonderfully. And so I quit claim my great-grandfather Ingham's rule to you. Assume that your really major opportunities in life are going to be few. And when you get a Lollapalooza, for God's sakes, don't hang by like a timid little rabbit. Don't hang back. They aren't that many of the really big good ones. If you take the whole history of Berkshire Hathaway, if you take out the 20 best transactions, our record is a joke. Well, 20 best transactions over 40-some years, That's one every 2 years. And we work at it all the time. Life is not just bathing you in unlimited opportunities, even if you work at being able to find them and seize them.
I saw another hand right here.
Mr. Munger, thank you for coming today. My name is Philip. I'm an undergraduate junior at business school. Considering the decline of manufacturing in the U.S. as production shifts to markets with lower cost of manufacturing, how can our country refit our education system, maintain our competitive advantage in the global economy in terms of intellectual capital, and providing value-added services such as technology and healthcare?
Well, of course, you're talking about a really important phenomenon. The rise of Asia is an awesome force, and it's a tidal force. And if you're going to have free trade, which I think we have to have with a fellow nuclear power on the complex world we live in, you're talking about something that is very hard on a manufacturing place like Michigan. If you think about what happened to Michigan, think about the automobile business of Hyundai when they created it in Korea. For the first many years of Hyundai's manufacturing in competition with Michigan, the workers who were all Korean, and for some weird reason, were better on average than American workers, whether it's the Confucian ethos or their poverty or whatever it was. These were very reliable workers. And the terms of their engagement was as follows. You come into our factory, you work 84 hours a week. There is no overtime. You just keep doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it. Well, of course that's going to be hard on a guy that's manufacturing a competitive product. And just when the Koreans started to get rich, 1,300,000,000 Chinese, and I don't know how many there are in Vietnam, tens of millions. Oh, and they're all doing it. This is a tidal force. It's seriously disruptive. I don't see what we do about it. In terms of changing the educational system, I live in California. In objective standards, it's better than ever. But the faces are way more Asian in percentage than I see here. The Berkeley Engineering School, I think, is more than 75% Asian. I mean, it is just amazing how California is rising on the backs of these talented Asians. I am chairman of a big hospital, a bad location. It's a losing hand. I play the hand on purpose because I played so many winning hands. I thought I owed it to I owed it to civilization to carry one hair shirt and keep it on, no matter how much it hurt. And I must say it's worked perfectly. But Good Samaritan Hospital is still standing and still reputable, and there's much that's good at it. But I look down the faces that are doing it, and the guy who's doing all the programming of the gamma knife, which is very complicated physics, he's a PhD in physics from China. And there's Dr. Ho from Harvard and Dr. Chung. It's just boomity, 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 boom. And I've got a sea of Asian faces. So California is not going down. These Asian faces are going to help us stem the tide, in other words. So, and I see a lot of Asian faces in this room. And so, don't you have Toyota here in Michigan? And you're getting some of it too, but not like California. But I just think you're in for a rapid change of the world where the Asians get way more important and we become less important. And somebody says to me, don't you worry about the competition for the Mungers? And I said, no. If the Mungers can't handle the Asian competition, let them lose. I don't feel I'm here in life to guarantee the Mungers win against the Asians. I like the meritocracy. It's particularly when there's so much achievement. You know, when I was young, everybody that shoved a camera in my face, it was German. Well, this morning they were shoving cameras in my face. They're all Japanese. They earned the right to shove those cameras in my face. It wasn't easy to displace those Germans. It wasn't like the Germans weren't good at it. So I welcome all this stuff. But I do think you're going to have to adjust to a world where this tidal force in manufacturing, with this cheap labor and this vast, easy adaptability to modern capitalism that exists in Asia, just keeps rising as a tidal force. And I think you have to get used to it. And wherever you turn around, you're going to find it looks more like the Good Samaritan Hospital, where more of the faces that are rising are Asians. I welcome it. I know how much better my hospital works with all these Asian faces. And what the hell do I care if the guy's name is Wilson or Chung? You know, I like all these Asians. And when I go down to that hospital, 8:30 I'll sometimes go down to the guy who's programming the gamma knife for the next day, my Chinese physicist. There he is, 8:30 in the evening. He comes in early in the morning. And a gamma knife is a very hard thing to correctly program. So I'm all for this change, but I do think all of us face it, and we just better get used to it. And I think part of enjoying life is to just see it like it is and face it like it is and adapt to the reality as it is, whether you like it or not. And the reality as it is that Michigan is not going to dominate the world in autos the way it once did. The baton has been passed. Athens is never again going to be the leader of all civilization. Nor is Rome. Nor is London. The baton passes. The iron rule of life in an historical sense is that if you're lucky enough to be in a leadership position, eventually you have to pass the baton. That's the rule of human systems. Biologically, we all have to die, and as successful systems, we eventually have to pass the baton. Those are the rules. And if you don't like them, you're on the wrong earth. Yeah.
Could I ask someone what time it is? Because I didn't wear a watch. Okay, we have more time for questions. So why don't we go ahead? I have seen some more hands up, and I see people up here, and I'm sorry, I've been ignoring
At
the upper
Berkshire, we
deck.
always excuse the people who can't stand anymore or have pressing other engagements. And then we leave the groupies. And, I'd still be in Omaha answering questions if I let them run my timetable.
I see a question up here from the upper deck.
Yeah, my name's John Potter. I'm a faculty member at the law school and also a shareholder at Boo. And you speculated that Japan might be better to weather long periods of stagnation more equitably than we would socially in the United States.
Sure.
And I wonder, do you think we're starting to see some of the social fracturing in this country? I'm thinking
Sure, of course.
party movement. Is this an anger that's unusual, or have you seen this a million times over your...
No. Of course we're seeing more trouble. There's a guy at Harvard that is, there's a Harvard professor. He's famous. He's so famous I can't remember his name. But who has studied this, and he says these homogenous societies, like Japan, of course it's easier to run an homogenous society than a one with a whole bunch of people with different religions, different attitudes, different cultures, different backgrounds, and so forth. So the nature of our situation means that handling politics in a society like ours and handling reverses is going to be more difficult than it was for Japan. I think that's obvious. And I think what we're already seeing is just part of it. And in France, they strike against the atomic plants. And there are all kinds of crazy cultures of resentment. And I think that is another problem you're going to have to adjust to. That if we are in for something that looks more like economic stasis, there's going to be a lot more social tension. How could it be otherwise? Take a rich family in a prosperous business that ever grows. They may hate each other, but they get along. The ever-growing tide of money submerges the natural antagonisms of the sibling rivalries. Now let the business start having reverses. I've seen this 1,000 times. In the family business, the hatreds and troubles that come when the great fountain of ever-rising prosperity for all goes in reverse are simply awesome. And of course, something like that tends to happen in the body politic if things get tough. But it gives you one more interesting thing to think about. Yeah.
Mr. Munger, under President Bush, just before he left office, as you know, there was a $750 million bailout, and then since President Obama came into office, another $750 million. In your opinion, would it have been wiser to bail out Main Street and, let's say, the government extending like a student loan to houses who are facing foreclosure, forfeiture, or eviction for renters, rather than bailing out Wall Street? Keep that money.
Well, I think you've got it exactly wrong. I think those bailouts were absolutely required to save your civilization and to give you the best chances of solving the housing and student loan and other problems. I think that was absolutely required, and we were lucky that both administrations were as wise and bold as they were. So you shouldn't resent that. You should thank God they did it. And I think if you understand the system and the dangers it was in, you would recognize that that's the least of that. That was your blessing.
What would have happened potentially?
We don't know, but it could have been awful. I don't even want to think about how awful it could have been. And it is not completely crazy. The Germans were pretty civilized people. I always point out that Albert Einstein got a highly subsidized primary school education in Germany from the Catholic Church. His whole primary institution of little Albert Einstein was subsidized by the Catholic Church. That is a pretty civilized place. And we ended up with Adolf Hitler. Get the economy with enough misery, get enough disruption, destroy the currency. God knows what happens. So I think when you got troubles like that, you shouldn't be bitching about a little bailout. You should have been thinking it should have been bigger. I mean, those people were working for you, and they were in both parties. They were a credit to both of us that all that happened. And now if you talk about bailouts for everybody else, there comes a place, if you just start bailing out all the individuals instead of having to adapt, that the culture dies. I don't know where it is, but at a certain place, you got to say to the people, suck it in and cope, buddy. Suck it in and cope. And in the 30s with my family, as these families would move into the same house, and they'd wear the same clothes for a while, and they coped, and that was part of how the civilization got through. We do not want a civilization where, with every hardship, we go to the government and say, "Give me some money." The world's not what I expected. So I think there's danger in just shoveling out money too much on the people who say, "My life is a little harder than it used to be." Of course it's a little harder than it used to be. This is normal worldly life. And I think it is very dangerous to assume that what people did to save the whole banking system was wrong, and that it is clearly right to shovel out a lot of money to people who are now short of money. I think we come to a place where everybody has to suck it in and cope. Yeah.
Other questions? Do I see hands? How about right here?
Earlier today, you advocated large infrastructure projects essentially funded by the deficit, which is already fairly high as a percentage of GDP. I'm wondering, at what point does it become more of a Ponzi scheme and less of a borrowing money from people? Because they have to be paid.
Is it a Ponzi scheme when Holland, which 30% of which is below sea level, creates a gigantic public work that creates 30% of the arable land and supports the whole civilization? Are people going to think less of Holland as a credit when they're borrowing money to prevent the North Sea from inundating Holland? I don't think so. I think if we're just shoveling the money at people, people will think we're a bunch of jerks, like Greece. And that is dangerous, because partly you need credibility in the world. But if we're issuing a lot of IOUs to do something any fool can see is highly desirable to do, and we're doing it through competent and honorable people, I think we're way safer. I think how you're spending the money matters greatly. I think reputation matters greatly. And I'm quite confident that the United States reputation would stand a major use of credit to do something everybody recognized as a wise course of action competently done. And so I think the danger is shoveling out money to people who say they need it without limit. And the other thing is safe, and the other thing will solve hugely important problems. I don't know why everybody doesn't think the way I do. To me, it's obvious.
I see a question in the back right here.
My name is Joe. I'm a Ross MBA, and I'm doing a dual degree at the University of Michigan Medical School. So I'd be glad to know what you think about the future direction of the healthcare sector in the United States and in some Asian countries like China. Thank you.
Well, of course, China's spending a tiny percentage of GDP on healthcare, and we're spending a high percentage. In an aging, affluent civilization where GDP rises at 2 or 3% per year per capita, I don't think it matters at all if we spend 20% of GDP on healthcare. I don't think it matters that much if 20% of the healthcare is no damn good that we're buying. You know, like Botox for women for whom intervention is hopeless. and so healthcare is a whole different can of worms, but I don't think it's our main problem at all. And I think it is quite natural in our particular civilization to have a fair amount spent on healthcare. If you live to be as old as I am, I'm surrounded by people where their joints hurt so much the pain is unendurable. They're like the Tin Woodman. One hip, one knee, one knee. You know, I got a big infection, 30 days in the hospital. This is expensive. But if that's the way the civilization wants to spend the money, I don't consider it a crazy choice. And so we do have a crazy system for healthcare, and there are perverse incentives. There's many a hospital in this country where the doctors are fishing the people out of nursing homes and bringing them into the hospital so they can walk by the bed and bill the government $45 a day. And if they've got 10 patients in the hospital, that's $450. And the fact that they're using up resources which could be improved by the services aren't being able to get. In my hospital, I have a little list, and so does the hospital. And those jerks are on their way out, and they should be. And so there's a lot of abuse in healthcare, and one of the ways you fix it is so the people who have the power, they exercise it to prevent the abuse. A lot of places you have get live in a hospital. Just nobody really wants to criticize anybody. That's a huge mistake. It's a huge mistake. In our leading academic hospitals, I'm sure this isn't happening in Michigan, but I have a friend whose daughter is head of infectious diseases in some medical school hospital, great hospital. And of course the doctors there are fishing the people out of the nursing homes and bringing them in so they can walk by the beds and bill. And they're bringing in these terrible infections. And that takes a lot of treatment and a lot of walks by the bed and so on and so on. And of course the parents of this particular doctor recognizes she's sort of risking her life going through medical school because of the abuse of the system by some of the doctors in a hospital where nobody is stopping the abuse. You know, it's like Burke said, for evil to triumph in the world, all that is necessary is that good men do nothing. But all over America, some people are intervening to stop some of these abuses. And you have to identify them, you have to rationalize, and you have to be willing to take the ill will. I have a friend, this is another wonderful story on human nature, chief of the medical staff, Southern California Hospital, and a bunch of non-board certified anesthesiologists who came out of, I forget the sub-branch of medicine, but it's not chiropractic, but it's, anyway, they got in control of the anesthesia department of the hospital. And he could see that they had created 3 totally unnecessary deaths and covered up every single one. And he knew he was just going to ruin his life. So he got rid of them all. He changed the whole system. He ruined families. He ruined incomes. He cleaned house. And he told me the story 20 years later, and I said, what happened? And he said, to this day, none of the people I cleaned out and none of their friends has ever spoken to me. He was willing to take all that ill will to do the Lord's work and do it right. And you can say, why did he wait for the 3rd death? Well, maybe he thought he needed that much horror to accomplish the fix. But all over America, there are stories like that. That's a good story about human nature. That's a story about wisdom and virtue triumphing. And of course, they don't always win. Even in a bullfight, the bull sometimes wins.
I'd like to give one more chance if there's anybody up top who wanted to ask a question, because I realize I haven't looked up there all that often. Is there anyone upstairs who wants a question? If not, I do see some hands I thought down here. All right, you guys lose. How about right back here in the back?
Hi, I'm a second-year student at the law school, so thanks for the lights. And I'd like to follow up a question by a 2L sitting over there. It was posed earlier. I have also sometimes felt, oh, why did I go to law school? Why didn't I study science? You know, had that liberal arts regret. But in a more positive sense, since we're still young and optimistic, I think we have questions about what useful role we can play as well. And so I'm wondering, the legal profession as a whole, specifically directed to kind of our group of soon-to-be new attorneys, any ideas for how to change the legal profession for the better to avoid crises like the recent one, or just to make it a better system?
Well, the legal profession has always been a way up for people who know they don't want to grind through the problem sets of science for 6 years, or who don't like the sight of blood. And so, welcome to the club. Takes one to know one. And it's always been a profession that allowed a certain amount of flexibility. You can start in the legal profession and you can go in a lot of different kinds of activity within it, and you can leave the legal profession and go into something else. And that's what's going to happen to your class too. The legal profession has been bifurcated in America in a very peculiar way now. The ordinary little lawyer in a small town makes $60,000 a year doing divorces and collections and minor wills and so forth. That's a pretty demanding, difficult way to make a living. And the lawyers in the really big, powerful firms were willing to work 70 or 80 hours a week for 9 years and punch their ticket and rise to become partners. And then when you get to be a partner, you get to keep doing it. That's your reward. You get to keep doing it. And those people make a lot of money. Are there abuses in a culture that gets that money mad about billing hours? Of course there are. I see bankruptcy cases that remind me of a bunch of hyenas going at a carcass on the plains of Africa. It doesn't look to me like a learned profession at all. It looks to me like hyenas at work. And so there's lots wrong with the legal profession, but there's lots right with it. And there's enormous opportunities within it to live a very constructive life and to make a good living in a reputable fashion, and to have various options to leave if that's what you desire to do. But of course there are abuses. I do not see a lot of abuses in the judiciary. I think we have an amazingly clean judiciary in America, and it's a blessing for us all. And every judge I ever knew behaved better on the bench than he did before. And they were usually pretty good people before. And so I think our legal system is really a pretty reputable system. I do think when you get into the part of the legal profession that's most closely intertwined with Wall Street, that you